Chapter 9, Section 1 is entitled Square Roots. We start with three definitions. First is the definition of a square root. A square root of a number n is a number m which when multiplied by itself equals n. Square root of a number n is a number m which when multiplied by itself equals n. Square root of a number n is a number m which when multiplied by itself equals n. Radical expression. A radical expression is an expression involving a radical sign, or what most of you would probably call the square root sign. That's the one that kind of looks like the long division sign, but it's got a check mark on the side, basically. An expression involving a radical sign. And perfect squares, a number that is a square of an integer. A number that is a square of an integer. Now, over on the whiteboard behind Elaine and Sabrina over there is a list of some of the first perfect square roots for you. Now, the perfect squares and perfect square roots are inverses of each other. Right? So when we're finding square roots, we actually start off creating a list of squares. So that's why it starts off over there, 1 squared equals 1, 2 squared equals 4, 3 squared equals 9, 4 squared equals 16, 3 next 5 squared equals 25. When we read it from left to right, it's a list of squares. When we read it from right to left, then it gives us the square roots. So where I have 2 squared equals 4, if I read it the other way, then the square root of 4 has to equal 2. Square root of 9 equals 3. Square root of 16 equals 4. So on and so forth. That might not be a bad thing for some of you who copy, although that is entirely up to you. Now, it's also important for you to remember that there's two ways I can make a positive number in terms of multiplication, and that's got to be remembered too. Right? We generally, when we talk about square roots, we just worry about the positive ones. 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, and 5 times 5 is 25. But it also works for negatives if you think about it. Right? Because think about it, if I multiply two negative numbers together, it's still going to be positive. Right? 5 times 5 is 25, yeah, but negative 5 times negative 5 is also plain old 25. So when we go through answers, there's going to be a lot of sections here where we're going to say the two answers, or there will be two answers because there's a positive one that works and a negative one. As far as we're talking about, as long as we're talking about negatives, let me also mention that there's no such thing as the square root of a negative number. That is to say, there can't be a negative sign underneath the square root sign. Think about it. What number can I multiply by itself to make a negative? There's nothing. There's nothing I can multiply by itself to make a negative. Right? Because 5 times 5 is 25, negative 5 times negative 5 still makes positive 25. There's nothing I can multiply by itself, or no number I can multiply the same together with, to make a negative. So those values actually don't exist. Now when I say don't exist, I don't know why I say this all the time, but I do. Technically, it's an imaginary number. Yes, we have imaginary numbers. Thank God you don't have to study those till you get to Algebra 2. So don't worry about those right now. So anytime you see a negative sign underneath the square root, no, it doesn't exist, no solution. You can have a negative sign right outside of it, but you can't have one underneath. All right, so let's go ahead and go into the examples here. Again, a lot of stuff today is going to be two solutions, and also, I haven't mentioned this yet, this is definitely a good calculator assignment. All right, there's a lot of stuff here that they even tell you to do with a calculator. So that should make this just all that much easier. All right. So let's go to the examples. Example 1, the square root of 9. What is the square root of 9? Kaylee? 3. Now remember, it's not just plain old 3, it's actually negative 3 too, because negative 3 times negative 3 makes positive 92. If you don't want to write 2 3s, we do have, actually in math, a positive and negative sign. If you want, you can write it like that. That means positive 3 and negative 3. You pick. You just got to do one. I don't care which, but do whatever you're comfortable. All right, square root of 289. Now, the list over there doesn't go to 289, but it shouldn't take you long to guess where 289 is going to lead you. Where's 289 going to lead us? Kaylee?
17.
17. Good. So it's 17 and negative 17. All right. Square root of 2601. Square root of 2601. It's 51. You could also go with negative 51. All right. Now, the next section asks us which two values is the integer between. They're not asking you for a calculator answer here. They want to know what two integers or what two whole numbers is the answer between. All right. So, example 4 there says the square root of 30. Well, if we reference the list here, here's the square root of 25, here's the square root of 36. Obviously, the square root of 30 is going to be somewhere in between here. Well, we look at what they're equal to. They're equal to 5 and 6. So the answer here is that they're somewhere between 5 and 6. Right. And of course, it also, again, works for the negatives. So you could also say it's between negative 5 and negative 6. One thing you can't do in this problem that we could do up top, you cannot write plus minus 5 and plus minus 6, because I don't know which combination you're talking about then. Do you mean negative 5 and positive 6? Do you mean positive 5 and negative 6? Do you mean the two positive, two negatives? There's too many options there. Right? So you can't do it that way. So you have to write that one separate. All right, square root of 19. Well, if we reference back to the list, square root of 19, well, here's 16, here's 25. 19 is going to be somewhere in the middle here. So somewhere between 4 and 5, which is what those equal. And of course, again, the negatives are going to work too. All right. So, what two things is the square root of 40 going to be between? 40. Corinne? 6 and 7. Very good. Good. All right. Now the next section you're going to like, because here it says use a calculator to approximate to 3.